AI is going to take over the world. AI is just another empty hype from Silicon Valley. AI will take your job. AI is programmed to spread misinformation. AI is just another way to control the masses. There's a lot of information about AI out there, a lot of hype, a lot of financial transactions, and frankly, it can be pretty intimidating to figure out what's going on. I have had a lot of discussions with other Christian homeschool parents about AI, and I thought I'd save myself some time and maybe reach a few more people and share some of what's going on and some of my thoughts on what's going on in a video. My father was both a pastor and a computer programmer. So I learned about Christ and I learned about programming from the same person. And so to me, the two have always been very closely related in some ways. I have not, of course, been afraid of technology. I have now had a career as a computer programmer for over 20 years at companies like Microsoft and Adobe and eBay and some startups as well. So I have had a broad experience doing things with computer programming. I've also am raising 5 kids that I am homeschooling and teaching the faith as they grow older. And to me, this is very important. Many of the parents that I have talked about this with, I have met at STOA, which is a national homeschool speech and debate organization, which I would recommend to any Christian homeschooler. It is a fantastic organization and a great place also to fellowship with other parents. In this video, I can only give the barest intro to AI and what AI is, at least where we are now. I can point you to some other resources and I can ask that you let me know what else you'd really like to hear about. Subscribe, go to comments, send me an email. I'd be happy to go into depth on almost any topic, but I'm trying to be helpful, so I'd like to know what it is you need. I'm going to start with just some brief, important things. First of all, the nature of AI. In no way are the current AI tools anything like sentient thinking or conscious. They are math. They are not programming in the way we've traditionally had programming where you say, hey, if this happens, and then you have a lot of cases and write a lot of code. They're not like that. They are mathematical models all the way down, mostly calculus, linear algebra, statistics. Essentially, they take a lot of data and apply probabilities to it to come up with data that makes sense to match it. So again, it isn't something that is being consciously programmed. It isn't something that is consciously thinking. Now, none of this is to say that it isn't powerful and that it isn't intriguing, that it isn't possibly quite dangerous, that it isn't potentially quite useful. Before I get deeper into how this realm of AI works, I'm going to just demo really quickly a small subset of what can currently be done with these tools. Don't misinterpret a little enthusiasm for and perhaps amazement at what the tools can do for thinking that they should be used willy-nilly or that they aren't of concern. I certainly have a lot of concerns about AI and what it's going to do to society and our children. But I do think it's really important to understand exactly what can be done. So I want to show you some of the many things people are using AI for and have been over the last couple of years. I'm speaking live currently with ChatGPT. ChatGPT, go ahead and say hello to our viewers.
Hello, everyone. It's great to be here with you all. Hope you're having a wonderful day.
So you're both generating the voice and the text as you're talking to me, right?
That's right. I'm generating both the voice and the text in real time as we chat.
Wow. And you can do things like talk in a big, strong voice. Go ahead and show them.
Sure. Here's a big, strong voice for you.
Now try talking in just a whisper.
Sure. Here's a whisper for you.
All right, now talk in a normal voice, but talk, let's say, with an Australian accent.
Sure. Here's my normal voice with an Australian accent, a bit louder.
And we can have conversations about just about anything. Like I could say, hey, did the Spurs win today?
Yes, the San Antonio Spurs won their game against the New Orleans Pelicans with a score of 119 to 115.
What's the record of the Pelicans this season?
As of now, the New Orleans Pelicans have an 18 and 50 record and are currently out of playoff contention.
Yeah, I'll say. All right, thanks.
You're welcome. Glad to help.
All right, now we've shown you the voice. Let's do something else fun. Let's see. Let's say generate me an image of an elephant eating French fries. Make it cartoonish. There we go. Now, we could talk more about the technical details, but essentially this was completely generated based on lots of images that it's been trained on. And it's just showing us some French fries with the little weird things going on here. You can see that this is AI if you look carefully. And it's important to learn how to recognize AI art, at least at the moment. Not only can you generate images, but it can also generate video. So let's continue our elephant theme and say, create a video of two formally dressed elephants having a debate in front of an audience filled with all kinds of animals. Now, this is going to take a little while, so we're going to make a little cut here. So you can see here we have the video. It is not great, but it is also surprisingly realistic. You can see a lot of different kinds of videos available. Let me show you. If we go to featured, this will show some of the ones that other people are creating and some of the other kinds of videos that can be created. Some of them are nature themed. You can see some always a little bit of weirdness. It's still not perfect, but it's pretty interesting. And again, it's very useful to know what these kinds of videos look like so that when you see them, you'll know what to look for. Now, this is sort of the core ChatGPT feature, which is the chat. All right. But notice we have a couple of options here. We can actually say, hey, I want to do a search. And now we can say, for instance, what is the current status of tariffs on Canada as of today? Not threatened tariffs, but what is actually in effect. So now it's actually going to search the web. You can see here, and it's going to give us an accurate answer as of recently. So we see there's a general goods, energy products, steel and aluminum. Yes, I remember hearing about this. 50%. And some retaliatory measures that we can read about here. So it's an interesting way. And notice that it sources what it's actually telling us. We're not having it's when ChatGPT and AI first came out 2 years ago, it it would often just sort of make up what it needed to make up. It didn't have access to the web. It didn't have access to sources. Things have come a long way in just 2 years. And this is one of the bigger ones. Now we can see exactly where it's getting these articles. And if we wanted to double check it, we can click on any of them. Now I'm going to show you some code created by another AI tool called Claude.ai. This is interesting. My father was named Claude, and so it's a little bit bittersweet for me. Let's say, so we're going to create a little page here, big circle in the middle, but it moves away when I try to click it. You can see here is actually creating the HTML, the body. This all looks good to me. Being a programmer, I can tell it's fairly simple, but it's doing a pretty good job. It even added a nice little thing. So let's go ahead and we can try it right here. Oh, wait, go back. Back. See, pretty good. Just a simple coding exercise, but the coding abilities of AI in general are getting a lot better as we go forward. And there is a bit of an open question. If you or your children are involved in computer programming, what's it going to look like in 1 year, much less 5 or 10? And it's an interesting thing I'd love to do a whole separate video on, being, of course, something I'm very opinionated on. Now, there's a lot of different what are called models. And then we started with 3.5. I'll talk more about this later. One of the more interesting variations is recently we have had what's called reasoning models. So I'm going to go ahead and use one of the newer ones, an O3 mini. So a reasoning model. What does that mean? It means that when you ask it a question, it doesn't just start coming out with an answer. It does like something like what humans would do, and it actually reasons to itself. So let's go ahead and do something obvious. If you're in Stoa, you'll recognize this. So there we go. I don't recommend, well, let's see what kind of arguments it comes up with. Maybe I can come up with some way to win this resolution. So now you see it reasoned for 4 seconds. Now take a look. This is actually literally the text that it came up with. So it's sort of talking out different ways that it's going to solve this problem and then coming out with, here we go, a fair number of checks and balances, public safety. These are some arguments I'm sure that if you have students debating this topic that they have considered and thought about, nothing especially unique about this. However, they have found that this reasoning, let's try a different prompt here. I'm going to do a classic. And this is something that the AIs, interesting enough, have really struggled with. How many R's are in the word strawberry? This is an interesting thing that tells us about how, there we go. Now, the way AI thinks doesn't always match up with the way they think. However, in this case, break it down. Letter R appears in positions 3, 8, and 9, which means there are 3 R's. You can see again that it's sort of thinking to itself. However, if we go and we try a new query, and we don't use a reasoning model, let's just use a standard model. Okay, it gets it there too, but it is something that has been giving. I think at this point they've probably hard coded it in all of the uh, models because people have been using this as a demonstration of how dumb AI is for about a year. It seems like AI has finally caught up. The important point here is that the reasoning models allow it to be more precise about things that require multiple steps in the way you think about them. Finally, I'm going to show you one more tool that's available with yet another service. In this case, it is called Perplexity. Interesting note, if you have Xfinity as your internet provider, look into joining their membership program. You can get a whole year of Perplexity Pro for free. What I wanted to draw your attention to is something called deep research. Let's go ahead, and this is going to go out, it's going to find a whole bunch of sources, it's going to synthesize them, and it's going to write essentially a research paper heavily sourced with all the things that it found out about. We're going to go with team policy for this one. One of the team policy arguments I heard during the finals of one of our recent tournaments. Imagine if kids had this during their rounds. So you'll see this is actually going to take some time, and I'm going to cut the video a bit at this point. But you can see it's making declarations of what it's going to search for. It's gathering a bunch of different sources, MedPage Today, TextMed, from papers. It can gather sources from articles, and will continue to do research for quite a while. Sometimes this will take as many as 5 or 10 minutes to really go in there, and we'll just cut ahead here and see what it comes up with. All right, now we are seeing the actual answer. It took, looks to be about 4 minutes to come up with this answer. And you can see it's well sourced, Stark law. This matches everything I saw in the round that I was judging. And we can see here again, we have sources for all of these things. We can click on these sources, and this is actually opened up in another screen. It's opened up a paper that's talking about exactly the impacts of the law. And it's giving us both sides of the argument. Again, copiously sourced, talking us through the entire thing. It's a lot of interesting work. Now, we can't be sure all of this is 100% correct. It is not thinking, it is just duplicating, but it is really interesting and quite helpful in understanding this particular topic. And it can point us in a lot of important directions so that we can get a good understanding of this topic. So that was fun. A lot of things to throw at you there. And that is just a snapshot of all the things that are available right now and going to be available soon. Let's get into the math now. Most of the current AI tools that are getting media attention are built on deep learning, which is a subset of something called machine learning. These are essentially networks of data that build connections between the data. It's inspired by the structure of the human brain, like neurons, but it is very different in actual function. At its core, an AI model is trained using billions and now even trillions of data points, adjusting numerical weights in a way that allows it to sort of predict what's coming next. The data can be language, like we saw with ChatGPT, or photos, or videos, or voice, or sounds, a mix of these, and sometimes entirely new things that people are trying to train models on. To give you an idea what this means, think of the phrase peanut butter and what's the next thing that comes to your mind, right? It's probably jelly, right? Maybe mayonnaise if you're weird. This is how AI models work. They don't actually know what or understand what's going on, but they can predict based on patterns. They've seen enough data to know that peanut butter and jelly is the most likely combination in the context of food, so the model would predict that word. Now, you're probably familiar with rudimentary versions of this because they're on your phone right now, right? When you type and you type a text, it tries to predict the next word. But how do we go from something so simple where it just predicts peanut butter and jelly to the kind of stuff that I just showed you? There's two big things to call out that caused this big change. In 2017, a paper came out called Attention is All You Need. It outlined a method called the transformer that allowed language models to examine words not just in isolation, but in relation to each other. For instance, the word bank, it could mean a financial institution, or it could mean the side of a river, or it could mean a steep slope. Attention allowed AI to better understand the difference between I withdrew money at the bank and I caught fish at the bank. The second big change was a massive increase in the amount of data that was used to create these models. We typically measure the size of an AI model in parameters, which is literally the count of the number of the model has that it uses to predict new content. Now, GPT, the model behind OpenAI's ChatGPT, started in 2018 with 117 million parameters. About a year later, GPT-2 came out with 1.5 billion, GPT-3 in 2020 with over 175 billion, and the most recent GPT-4 is estimated to have something like 1.8 trillion parameters. Now, while we saw regular predictable progress in model capability as the numbers increased, there were also something we could call emergent behaviors that people did not expect. So think of this like an ant colony, right? We wouldn't say that an ant is intelligent, but we can see that when they work together and they follow simple rules, they do things, ant colonies, that very much seem like intelligence, such as finding paths to foods or building intricate colonies. Now, one note about the scale, though, it appears to be topping out. So geometric sizes and increases in size, going from billions to trillions, are yielding linear gains in abilities. So it's not clear how much better models will get simply by making them bigger and bigger. It's also extremely expensive and energy hungry. I can't do this topic justice, of course, but I hope I've given you some impression of what's going on. I cannot recommend strongly enough the YouTube channel 3 Blue 1 Brown. I've linked it below in the comments if you want the full, accurate, and beautifully illustrated details about how AI is working under the hood. They also illustrate higher math, such as calculus and linear algebra. It's a great, trustworthy source. Now, I briefly touched on some of the models that started this, and you saw me demo with models from 3 different companies. But I want to tell you about the situation today and all the models and companies that are making models. OpenAI started this recent AI boom when they released their model ChatGPT 3.5 on November 30th, 2022. It was supposed to be a preview, but it caught on fire. And that's literally what started all of this boom. They followed it up with quite a few more models since then. The most significant is ChatGPT 4.0 and o1. O1 is the reasoning model that I demoed earlier. It was the first of them. I demoed O3, which is a later one, and is, in my opinion, it's one of the most significant developments over the past 2 years. The performance improvement by having models reason, talking to themselves, is a new way to make the models smarter without just increasing scale massively. There's also some other ways that we've increased precision lately, which is improving the data that we're training them on, selecting exactly the right data. There's a lot of things going on. Again, I could do a whole video on nothing but this. Now, there are a lot of other companies involved in creating models besides OpenAI. Every major company has models of their own, and the competition between all of them is increasingly intense. Google has Gemini, currently at 2.0. Meta, that's Facebook, has the Llama model and actually released it for anyone to host for free. A company called Anthropic has the Claude series, which I demonstrated earlier. Elon Musk has Grok with X. Amazon is working on Olympus, and there's also a whole bunch of open source, smaller models, as well as specialized models that do specific things. Quite a few of these are coming from China. One recent Chinese release that shook the whole AI landscape and actually caused a bit of a stock market panic was called DeepSeek R1. Uh, it was significantly cheaper to build, but still very competitive with the models from established companies. Some questions about exactly where they got it, but one of the more interesting things they've done is they've released it open source. In other words, you can download all the numbers that are involved in the model and run them for yourself locally. That has actually been used, and people have been able to modify it and tweak it and remove restrictions that had been placed on it, right? If you just downloaded their initial version and said, hey, tell me about Tiananmen Square, it would say, I'm sorry, I can't respond to that. But now people have been able to jailbreak it, take those same numbers, and it will actually tell you about Tiananmen Square or a reasonably balanced opinion about Taiwan. Now I want to touch on some things that are more opinion than hard fact. First, let's talk a little bit about some theological issues going on here. Clearly, no AI has a soul, and none of it is made in the image of God. There isn't even room for discussion on that one. It seems obvious, but when you interact with them, if you remember how I was talking and they sound so lifelike, it is important to keep this in mind always. These are not beings with souls. This is math. It does and will raise a lot of interesting questions about what being made in the image of God means. Personally, I think it drives home the point that the image of God is not rationality by itself. As AI develops, we can continue to see its capabilities as things that illustrate what is not part of the image of God, or at least not the whole image of God. Now, let's talk a little bit about how do we engage with AI as parents. The biggest thing I want to caution against is complete non-engagement. In other words, no AI in our house. This genie is not going back in the bottle. AI is going to play a big role in the future of humans. How big and to what effect, it's still to be determined. And I urge Christians to be a part of that future. The thing is, that future is happening whether we like it or not, and whether we are part of it or not. And that goes double for our children. We need to be with them, just like we are with the internet, or libraries, or TV, or any other thing in the world that has both good and bad uses, which is pretty much everything in the world. Another reason to be engaged and savvy regarding AI is that increasingly we will be surrounded, if not bombarded, with content produced by AI. Articles, books, photos, videos, software, music, even what may seem to be like people. We and our children need to know what AI is capable of, when to use it, and when not to. It can be an incredibly useful tool, and I've only really shown you a fraction of what it can do. That goes for the bad things it can do as well. I want to end here, because this is already far too long a video, with a request of you. I want to know what you want to hear more about. I can go into depth on almost any of the big things I've touched on here, but I would very much like to give you the information you would find most useful, whether it's the underlying technology and the math involved, current uses, more on dangers and opportunities, anything where you feel getting the opinion of someone that I hope you can trust will help you figure out your next steps. So please subscribe, leave some comments. I really hope this has been useful. As I said, this is just a bare touch of everything that's going on in AI right now. I really prayerfully hope that this will help you engage with it in a productive way.